Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I decided to do another stream here, but it can't be epic like the last one, because that one was like 4 hours long. Nobody wants that, so it's got to be a little bit less. But hey, welcome back. Glad you're still paying attention to the channel, even though my last video only got like 40 views. I think I'm back down in the dumps, so I had to bring in a closer today. I brought in my great friend Will. Where is he?
Coffee is for closers.
There we go. All right, great.
Hello.
This is a very professional. Let's see if I can make it look a little bit better. Yeah, I think that's about as good as it gets. Hello, Will. Greetings.
Hello. Greetings.
Welcome.
Just the fact that you said that I'm a closer suddenly brings the coffee is for closers up in the front of my mind. But
that's right.
Beside the point. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, actually. I'm doing great. Yeah? I'm just chilling. Tomorrow, I'm going to Florida.
Ooh, what's in Florida?
So I still have to pack. Well, I got to go visit my family. Going to visit the family and going to hang out down there for a little bit of time.
Okay.
Hoping for good weather for the flight so we can get out on time.
Are you excited to temporarily leave the city life / suburb life behind for
I don't really have city life anymore. I just kind of live out in the charming little hamlet, towns of Suffolk County. I like it out here. It's kind of nice. It's still kind of new, but I like it quite a bit. It's quite nice. Hey, Will and I know each other from the debate world.
Yes, we do.
For many, many years. So we thought we would talk a little bit about debate and some of the things going on with the presidential debates. And did you watch Joe Biden's speech last night?
I did not. I was actually having dinner with my family. However, I am curious to know about your thoughts on it, Dr. Graham. Because
Dr. Graham.
We all have, those small moments, the small slip of the tongue. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all make mistakes, apparently. Right.
Yeah.
Some of us just do them more than others because of our agedness. Some of us do it because we think faster than we talk. I mean, I myself have called, people terribly incorrect names. My family is known for making mistakes when it comes to naming people. I mean, my dad called me every name other than my own, right? He named me all of the other men in my dad's family. So, he'd be like, Will, Scott, Jeff. He'd just name off all the men. Yeah. Like, oh, okay.
I've had that before with older people, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not see the speech last night.
I watched it.
How about you?
I watched it. I think, Fox News today is playing the clip. They have a clip of watching the cabinet members who are there react when Biden says, "That's why I chose Vice President Trump."
Yeah, that was a bit wild.
But this is the thing old people do. I don't think this is a sign of cognitive impairment, but I think that this is a really hard thing for people to deal with, or it's a hard thing for the Democrats to deal with. It's not hard for people to deal with. Like, looking at my comments is not a hard thing for people to deal with. Everybody just accepts that Joe Biden has dementia, Joe Biden has early Alzheimer's, or that he is senile or has cognitive impairment, which is the phrase the media is using. I don't even think that's is that an actual medical phrase? I think that's just the media being the media, and they're all interviewing each other about how Americans feel about it. It's really kind of sad, but I think that whether he's impaired or not, this is a huge perception issue. Whether he has Alzheimer's or not, it's a huge perception issue. So I don't know if they can fight back against it, because it's gone beyond as I was talking in Discord last night, I don't know if you saw the chat about the speech in the politics channel. Will's one of the lucky few invited to be on my Discord. Unlike you, maybe if you're a viewer and I like you, I might invite you, but the chances are low.
We are a fun crew, I'll say.
Yeah, we are fun, and we want to stay that way. So some of the YouTube people might not. You might not get. Don't get your heart hurt if you're not asked. So it's gone beyond. Originally, what I was talking about was that it was a Goldwater rule situation, but the media has not talked to any elder care professionals, elder care nurses, doctors who specialize in the elderly, geriatric medicine experts, mental care experts. None of these people have been interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? If this is what's going on, why wouldn't the media bring those people in? Well, they're either refusing to come in. I can imagine that the big journalist outlets have asked them to come in. They're refusing to come in, or they don't have anything to say that fits the media narrative that Joe Biden is losing it. But the perception is there, and it's not a Goldwater rule situation because everybody's had an experience with an old person who's kind of losing their ability to think clearly. And so everybody thinks they can diagnose this. And everybody looks at Joe Biden and they say, oh, this is obviously what's going on.
I mean, it's really funny because, well, it's not really funny. It's not funny. It's sad. But, like, this isn't new, right? So if we think back to when Trump got COVID in 2020, right? And he had that press conference outside of the hospital, and he had his doctor answer questions for the press, right? There was a lot of conversation about HIPAA and the degree to which individuals can speak out and talk about health in a professional fashion. When
speaking of professional, look at the camera moving around here. Okay, anyway,
it's fine. Like we're having fun today. No, but it's almost mind-boggling that 4 years ago we had professionals could come on the news and answer questions about HIPAA and what the doctor is and is not allowed to say. And
right. Yeah.
And when there were conversations in 2019 when we first heard that man TV person quote that Trump gave the first time he said that he aced the test, right? Like, I remember on CNN they had a couple of neurologists come on the news and talk about like what that test means and what it is. And it's almost like now they don't want to have that like professional input here, right? Instead, they want to carry on the narrative of like, oh, he's old, therefore we have everything to be concerned about.
Well, the story,
right?
yeah, the story is about how Americans feel that Joe Biden is losing the perception is, and that's the story they're running with, is the Democrats are like, oh, we don't think he can win because of the perception. But it's very different than it's very different than the HIPAA medical. It's very different than the situation of the Goldwater situation of medical expertise, and then there was Goldwater stuff about Trump being crazy or a narcissist or whatever, if you remember all that too. But
I
then
remember that.
The media was like, oh yeah, we can't possibly.
And then one of his family members had like the op-ed / the book about him or something, and showed his family history and how he's always been, this crazy narcissist who doesn't understand humor, and that was like a small blip on the 24-hour news cycle, right?
Yeah.
A very small blip.
Yeah, doesn't play too well. So as a communication, we're both communication PhDs.
We are.
Believe it or not, people out there watching.
We're doctors.
That's right, but not the kind of doctor that is here to help anyone.
Oh no,
We're the kind of doctor who's here to rule with an iron fist.
We're I joke about this. I consider myself an expert member of the peanut gallery, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like, I don't actually think that I have anything like of value to offer people other than
I have to flag this video for people with a peanut allergy now.
Yeah. Sorry, y'all.
YouTube rules.
Yep.
But as communication professionals, how do you I think Trump and his campaign are handling this great. Just let the Democrats spin out. Don't say anything. And it's like, I wonder who got it. I can't imagine who the consultant is who got a hold of Trump who can get him to shut his mouth and not want to be in front of the cameras all the time. I guess he's scratching that itch with all his crazy rallies where he talks about sharks or whatever, and we've all seen that. And everyone's like, typical Donald Trump. We're used to that. So it's insane, and it's the discourse of somebody who's not quite right in terms of cognitive ability, but it's expected. And so the communication, that doesn't make good news because it's expected for Trump to say crazy things. And then everyone says, yeah, he says crazy things. We know he's like this, but he has really good policies. That's what people will say who support him. But on the Biden side, how do you, as a communication expert, how do you get ahead of this? What do you do?
God, honestly, focus on policies, right? And I think that's what the campaign is attempting to do, albeit like really slowly, right? Like immediately after the debate happened this past week, right? When there was all the fallout of, we can't hear Uncle Joe, and Trump was saying all this kinds of crazy nonsense, right? Like his Twitter account, when I say his, Joe Biden's presidential Twitter account suddenly began to focus on policies, right? Like Trump is doing this, and this is a bad policy. Uncle Joe is doing this instead. And like, I think the policy approach is smart, right? Because there are still a lot of single issue voters who need to be reminded that, hey, comes November, right? Like this election is going to come down to things like student loans. It's going to come down to things like abortion. It's going to come down to things like potentially marriage equality, right? And, at least that sort of thing is what people need to hear. Now, whether or not they're able to hear it is an entirely different story, right? Because the media is still dead focused on Biden's health, which in and of itself is ultimately, it's doing us a disservice, right? Because we all know he's 1 years old, right? If anything, ancient. He sounds better than most 81-plus-year-old people I know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He sounds cogent, right? Like, heck, sure, the interview a couple days ago was supposedly disastrous, right? Doing his goodest job or
that interview. That interview had a lot of problems with it, but there are ways to spin those problems from the communication point of view. So, for example, when George Stephanopoulos says, "Did you watch the video of the debate?" And Biden goes, "I think I did." Okay, that's going to be evidence for you don't have your mind.
Yeah.
And people are going to read it that way.
No.
But I think I think it would have been better if he'd say, "I'm not sure because I have been planning for the NATO conference and I've been talking to our allies and I've been like, it's not effective. It's because his schedule is crazy." That's what
he should have been firm. He should have just said no. Even if that wasn't the truth, he should have just said no.
But you see, if it comes out he did watch it, then it's like either he totally forgot. So he does have dementia, or he's lying.
Right? Like, again,
so he's always in a bad place.
That's not really news, right? It's a lot more persuasive to be like, I didn't watch it, right? Like, that's the past. I'm focusing on the now. And that
is news, though, because people are going to say, "Oh, look, he did watch it. He has no memory of like what he did in 24 hours. He's got the nuclear codes." That's what people are going to say. I mean, I think the perception is, but I mean, then there's also like a bunch of young people who are probably not going to vote for him regardless because of Israel.
Because of the Israel-Palestine conflict. However, right, like,
they're not going to vote for Trump, so I just don't think. I think the national polls are like, Biden gained a point after last night. Did you see that?
Yeah, which is wild.
Weird.
But at the end of the day, right, there is still that large anti-Trump polling sentiment, right? Like, people are voting against Trump as opposed to for Biden. And I think when push comes to shove, there are going to be a lot of people who will be seeing Trump's name on the ballot and voting for their best chance to keep him off the ballot in the future.
But if Trump stays quiet, though,
Which
got it.
He can't do.
He can't. He won't. Well, he can't. But I think
can't do.
The rallies help, and I just don't know how much longer this. Another thing. I know we're jumping around quite a bit here, but another thing is like he meets with all these Democratic legislators, and they just don't have a very good answer to the media from a communication point of view. They say things like, "I'm not sure," or "We had a heart-to-heart talk," or Hakeem Jeffrey says, "We talked about starting points," or something. I don't want to misquote Jeffries, but he said something like that. It's just weird what they're saying to the media, because I think, if I didn't know any better, they're trying to create a sense that he's about to be replaced. I don't know by who it would be, Harris. I don't know. But instead of that, what they should say is, well, we meant to talk about the perception of it, and he was as clear and focused as he was in meetings about name of legislation that passed.
The DNC
that
has always been
wouldn't that be great if they would be like, yeah, he was as clear and focused as he was when we were negotiating the infrastructure bill that created X number of jobs and did this and this. That would be the way I would coach them to respond. I don't understand why they're not. Why are they acting like we'll see? Like they're acting all like kind of
because it's a long-standing issue,
sketchy.
Steve, right? The DNC has always been terrible when it comes to like inter-party messaging. Always, right? Like they cannot for the life of them commit to a simple message that gets voters activated and gets people ultimately riled up.
There's an old saying about that. It says Democrats fall out, Republicans fall in line.
Yeah, and you know it's true for, you know, heck, I've been talking to my colleagues about this for years now, right? Like, you know, you would think that, you know, with RVW being struck down, you know, the Democrats would be creating like amazing slogans and campaigns to remind voters that, you know, hey, you know, we are pro-choice. We are, you know, our policies save lives, right? Like we give individuals the right to own their bodies in ways that, you know, the right does not, right? Like they haven't done anything creative other than, you know, the Republicans took away abortion. Like that's quite literally all they've been able to come up with, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
but this is like an endemic.
Any legislative achievements of this Congress, of the Republican House, anyway, this Congress really are Democratic achievements.
Yeah.
So
it's insane.
They still feel way behind. It's a communication problem. I think that some of the people who were talking in my comments in the last couple of videos were kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, we're kind of saying that. Like, when they're telling me that I'm in denial or that I'm coping, I think what they're saying is, no, the messaging is bad. The clarity of it is, I was trying to make a completely different argument, but it didn't really work.
Well, I mean,
it didn't really work.
The coping thoughts, the coping comments all point to this idea of like, oh, you don't want to face reality, right? Like, you know, opium is high.
Yeah.
And I hear this statement all the time online, particularly among those who have high hopes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Silk Song, the game.
Nope.
Hollow Knight. Okay.
I do know Hollow Knight.
So they're working on a sequel called, or it's technically a prequel called Silk Song. They announced it like 6 years ago, and
6 years. Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while, and you know they keep saying, "Oh, it'll be coming out this year. It'll be coming out this year," and keeps getting pushed, right? And copium comes out a lot amongst the Silk Song crew because, you know, they don't want to face the reality of like, hey, like until Team Cherry, the developers, until Team Cherry officially announces something, you shouldn't expect them to just surprise you at the next Nintendo Direct, right? Like,
yeah, right.
So much copium in this thread, like, you know, this, that, and the other. It's all nonsense, right? Like, copium is a way of attempting to paint the person you're arguing with as someone unable to face reality.
Yeah, they're just they're on drugs.
It's an ad hominem.
That's what I think. Yeah, it's definitely
it's an ad hominem attack. Speaking of your videos, you know, I took the time to watch your two videos. You know, your debate response, and also your response to your debate response. And you know, and I think you make some really compelling arguments about, you know, what, like, the response to the debate. First off, I know this is 2 weeks late, you know, but
yeah, it's been a couple of weeks.
This debate is
this will all come back up
again
when they have the September 20th debate, which last night Biden said he's going to go do. Now the campaign has said they're not going to do any commission debates, is what they've announced to the press. But then last night Biden said that. So is that memory problems or is that a change in policy? We don't know.
I think Uncle Joe is just taking things on his own, and he's trying to
that's not good.
take ownership.
Well, that's
honestly,
good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, he's
right?
trying to be the old Joe Biden, aviators and ice cream Joe Biden.
Yeah, the Dark Brandon, whatever the
Dank Brandon,
the meme is.
Yes,
yeah,
Dank Brandon.
Whatever that is, right? But like the point is this, right? Like the most compelling point coming out of this, and a lot of people forget about like how Uncle Joe sounded this past March, right? Like 4 months ago, is he sounded fantastic at the SOTU, right?
Yeah, but the expectations were low.
State of the Union.
Expectations
were
low.
The expectations were low, but there were several amazing good moments out of this. Like especially when he called out Republicans about threatening to take freaking Medicare.
That was my favorite moment.
Yeah. Like that was the winning moment, right? That was unscripted Uncle Joe just calling it as
typical kind of nonsense that he does.
Right? And it seems as though all of us and the media too just forgot about it, which is inherently problematic because sure, he's 81 and sure he didn't do great at the debate. Right? But that is a single debate.
Yeah.
And the one thing all of us are taught is to give folks a second chance. Third chance, I don't know, but
15th chance.
Yeah, or if
I think the debate is the debate's such a bad metric because debates are weird and artificial, and they don't really represent what Joe Biden does every day. He doesn't go into a room and take rapid fire questions with no notes and no advisors and say what he thinks. That's not what presidents do. It's a bad test for Trump too. Yeah. And if somebody excels at it, it doesn't really mean that much. And if somebody fails at it, it doesn't mean that much. But I think it got roped in immediately into this guy is super old and acts really old and reminds me of my dementia grandpa or whatever. Right? I think that's what people
and the agenda in the way that's coming out of this sucks. Mm-hmm. It's so frustrating to see this agenda being written before our very eyes that Uncle Joe is old.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows it. Old man sounds old is my take, right? But
right?
people
but that's not new.
Yeah.
That's not new. We've known he's old as dirt. Heck, this is the same thing that was discussed 4 years ago when he was running, right? It was when it was him versus Sanders, right? Two old men are at the top of the DNC ballot.
Yeah, there's been stories about that with Trump too. The oldest people in the world.
It's almost not frustrating. It's infuriating because this is not anything new, right? It's not, and it's the same problem I have with all this critical coverage of Trump. That's Trump made this gaffe. I'm okay, he said something incorrectly, right? He called Tim Cook Tim Apple. Okay,
yeah, I thought that was funny.
Okay. That's just him being, I don't know, tired possibly. Can't really recall names.
It's him being the egoist that we all know he is. Yeah. So it's expected. So I think the question is rhetorically, it comes down to expected mistakes and unexpected mistakes, and that might be the way that. So an unexpected mistake, like Vice President Trump, or here's President Putin, and the ultimate surprise of NATO. If it really was President Putin who walked out, that would have been the ultimate twist ending of the NATO conference. But I think that, I think it needs a toasty. Yeah, so I think that would have been the ultimate twist ending. But I think that
coming out with a steel chair.
Yeah, it's Putin out of nowhere with a steel chair. My God, by God, by God. Everybody knows enough wrestling tropes to understand that. But I think that and Donald Trump actually participated in WrestleMania, so let's not forget that.
21, right?
22. I don't remember. I don't remember. But the thing, what was I going to say? The thing was, I can't remember what I was going to say now. Oh, expected.
Unintentional
I think
mistakes
the rhetoric of it is this interesting thing of somebody makes a mistake and it's part of their character or part of who we think they are. It's endearing. But if somebody makes a mistake that questions how we read their identity, then it becomes a threat, and we're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
So you know, if your beloved dad goes through the roll call of names every time he sees a cousin or somebody and goes now Tim, now Bob, now you know, that's like endearing. But when somebody doesn't do that and they just sit there, you know, it's like not. And I think Joe Biden was his whole public persona is this kind of witty guy who likes snark and he likes the savage burn and all that. Like at the end of the press conference last night, a reporter fired off a last question in the den of it, like, you called Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. This is the kind of thing they're talking about. What would you say to the people who are going to show that he said, well, listen to him, like listen to Trump, kind of saying you know, he sounds more idiotic than me is the argument there. But I don't know if that's enough. I think it's like, that kind of helps my thinking of it, because I'm just like racking my brain all day. Like, if you're a Democratic strategist, you're really cooked, because everyone is an expert in sundowning old people. Everyone's an expert in dementia, because everyone has, we're living longer lives. So everyone's been touched by this directly with somebody who they love, and they see the inability. And even on TikTok, you see a lot of people sharing their day-to-day with Alzheimer's and dementia patient, the people who they're caregivers, and they're sharing that as public awareness about what it's like to deal with this kind. So everyone feels like an expert. So we're way beyond Goldwater here. We're into people's personal lives, and you can't just come out and say, well, your personal experience doesn't apply to the president. You can't do that. So
on the topic of his like cadence, if you will, like the way in which he talks, because like this is also coming up in a lot of conversations about, oh, he's too soft, he's talking too slow, this, that, and the other. He has a speech impediment.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Like, I have a speech impediment. I was in speech therapy for 18 years of my life, right? Like, I quite literally have trouble talking, right? And it's almost as though the media has forgotten that he has a speech impediment. He's a world leader, and he's able to communicate ideas while occasionally slipping up. Yeah. Right? And
they've forgotten all about that. There's not been any mention of any of this.
I can't imagine.
Part of his speech impediment, you know. So,
right? Like, I have the same speech impediment as him. And I can't imagine being in his shoes and speaking in front of people on a regular basis. Like, I cannot.
Yeah, you're in front of all those cameras, all the hundreds of members of the press corps. You know, the world is watching you.
Yeah, in every single, like, every day. Right? And
it's a lot of stress.
Yeah, and like, I'm not saying that, you know, we need to move past. I mean, I am sort of saying this, but like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be concerned about Uncle Joe's
Uncle Joe
age.
You know, I'm so old.
That's my name from.
I'm so old. I always think of Uncle Joe. I think of Stalin, because that's what FDR called him in communiques to Churchill. So I always think whenever somebody says
Joe Biden, Uncle Joe,
Uncle Joe, I think of Joseph Stalin. Just so you know.
Okay, well,
that's not going to help the situation either, is it?
Not
like Uncle Joe, I'm like, what?
You know, I'm not saying we should ignore his old age.
What? How much? My curiosity is, how much should it concern voters who are like thinking about? I don't think it's realistic that anybody's thinking Trump Biden. I think that's already decided. I think it's Biden third party, or I'm not going to endorse him. There might be a few people out there who are like, a very small amount of people who are like Biden Trump, but I think that everybody's like, that's a big ideological jump. It's almost the same kind of resistance. Like, I just changed from Android to iPhone, and that was like, people took that in these very serious ways. They were like, "Oh my God, what? You switched?"
Like me.
Yeah, they took it very, very seriously.
I don't forgive you for this. Where's my Pixel?
Right.
Oh, it's charging.
But I think I think it would be even worse if you were like, "Yeah, I support Trump now," or "I support Biden now," if you were a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter. So that's the social price tag, or the ticket. The cost of that ticket socially to change like that, too expensive, and there's no financing available. But you could say, I can't support either of them, so I'll vote for a third-party candidate. I'll vote for the Libertarian. I'll vote for the Socialist. I'll vote for Jill Stein or the Greens or whatever.
I fear.
I think that might be what people are thinking of. So how much should the cognitive decline factor into that to be a reasonable judgment? If you think, Trump is like, I mean, there's so many factors, right? So if somebody thinks Trump is anti-democratic, then they probably will vote for Biden with a cognitive impairment. But if they think both candidates are anti-democratic, both are fascist-light, fascist-y kind of candidates, because I've heard that argument from my friends, that Biden and Trump, there's really not a lot of difference. They're both imperialist, fascist warmongers. So vote for a third party.
I think
it depends on, I guess, what you think is at stake. If you're one of these people's like Supreme Court positions, that's so important. Like, I don't even understand how we've let the Supreme Court become so powerful that they make Congress useless. It's so stupid. But anyway, that's a whole other talk.
That's a show in and of itself. But my gut reaction is twofold, right? Like, first, as it pertains to age, right? I think when we think back to like intentional versus unintentional mistakes, if the unintentional mistakes become unavoidable mistakes, right? Like something like he can't get through a single speech, or he needs trouble, like he has someone walking him up to the podium. He can't walk on his own. And when I say he, I'm not saying Uncle Joe. I'm saying either of them.
Yeah. Dr. Jill escorts him up and down the steps.
Right.
We saw some of that footage from the CNN debate.
Either of them, right? If either of them are so impeded by their age that they cannot do something as simple as like walking to a podium, like anything, like that's a day-to-day expectation, then that would be newsworthy. And that would be something that should be of concern to voters.
It's happening now.
Taking a step back, right? When it comes to folks who are on the fence and or like leaning towards voting third party, potentially, retracing the steps had occurred in 2016 when it came down to Clinton versus Trump. Right? And several key states were ultimately decided by people who were undecided or just chose not to vote because their candidate wasn't.
Michigan.
I think that there needs to be a concerted effort to remind voters like what's at stake and what happens if you choose to abstain and engage in protest voting. Right? I'm not saying that we should or should not engage in protest voting. What I'm saying is, like, there is a lot more at stake, and if you choose to use your vote in a way that like is essentially self-serving, then you might be putting others in a situation where their livelihoods and their lives are going to be harmed beyond repair. And I hate talking about like the future of this country and these grave terms, but that sort of symbolism, those appeals to fear, are things that will ultimately bring people to the ballot box.
Yeah,
right? It's what got them. It's what got folks super fired up in the 2022 elections, in the local elections, right? Like after RVW was struck down, and all of these politicians were proud of it. The majority of them were voted out because people were infuriated, and rightfully so. So yeah, when we think of what the DNC needs to do, they need to appeal to emotions. They can't keep relying on our logic ultimately making the decision. Because at the end of the day, too many voters are going to be voting from a position of some emotion, whether it be anger, fear, excitement.
Yeah, I think it's always that way. That's the way I always see it. But I wonder about this, the messaging of like, Well, it's either me or the terrible guy who says dictator on day one. That's what Biden keeps saying. The Biden campaign keeps saying. But they really should be focusing on people who want to protest vote about Gaza.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the messaging is there, because you could say, you should be scared about the quality of people's lives. They're going to be hurt if Trump wins. And they're going to say, you don't care about Palestinian children's lives. Those lives are ended. Talk about a change in life. Those lives are ended.
He has gone on the record.
These are the protest voters, right? So
yeah, like Trump has gone on the record and said something to the effect of, his plan is to throw every single Palestinian protester in jail.
Yeah, right.
Right. And oddly enough, Uncle Joe hasn't mentioned that. He has not used those words.
Right.
To remind voters of hey, you're protesting me. Imagine if he wins.
Yeah, I just don't think that's tracking with these people. I think that they're looking at the body count in
Uncle
Gaza.
Joe dead. Uncle Joe bad. That's essentially it.
Well,
Uncle Joe bad because he's sending money to Israel.
Yeah, they're looking at the
current
death,
as
at
opposed
the
to
deaths.
potential. Yeah.
But I think last night he tried to say, look, we tried to get Israel to be calmer, but he tried a little bit, but more of that. I mean, it's a long way till November too. It's just July. It feels like it's right around the corner, though. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of these I think are interesting to look at as communication questions.
Mm-hmm.
How does the DNC speak about it? RNC, I think, is doing a great job. There's not a lot to say there. Keep Trump occupied and quiet, and you will always do better than the spinning out Democratic committee where everyone's breaking ranks and everybody's saying that leave, stay, whatever. And then polls that say Harris will beat Trump by 3 points today. So there's all this crazy. Just let them eat themselves, and then you'll benefit. Something crazy might happen at the Republican convention, so we'll wait and see about that.
Yep.
But yeah, what else should we talk about? I feel like we talked about this for forever. But it's the big news item.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know what else to talk about. Debate. We can talk about debate.
We can talk about it.
We can talk about. We just published in Studies in Debate and Oratory today. You can see I'm so excited about it.
Oh.
So excited. I just had a huge yawn. That in Studies in Debate and Oratory, let me bring it up. This is a big day for me. Big day for me and Dr. John Reef.
Oh, congratulations.
Where we finally got a publication here. Studies in Debate and Oratory finally has our first essay, peer-reviewed, available for free, no login required, looking to the past and abroad to enhance U.S. presidential debates by Jacob Justice, Talia Shaw, and John. How do you say John's last name? From Vanderbilt. Is it Koch?
I believe so.
Or is it Koch?
I know all those people. Hold on. I know all those people.
Yeah. You do know all those people.
Small world. Goodness gracious.
Well,
That's
it
awesome.
is a small world in communication studies. Here, let's zoom in, and you can really look.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. You just named 3 people that I know. Yeah,
they wrote this together. It's a brilliant essay. There it is.
That's awesome.
And then you just come to the website, scholar.stjohns.edu/Cido, and you just click on it, and there it is. You can read it. Isn't technology lovely? Creative Commons license, everything. It's just like open access, free to all, share the information with the world. It's a beautiful thing. Cido, Studies in Debate and Oratory. Send us your essay. I would love to hear an essay about how I should burn my Ph.D. Why don't you write that one? That would be great. I'm trying to appeal to my audience. I should get a refund for my education. That would be a good essay, too. We'll look at that. I can't say we'll publish it, but we'll look at it.
We'll take a look-see.
We'll take a look-see. That's very good. I think it's very good. Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about rhetoric and YouTube. I wish that I'd had that kind of reaction from video one earlier on, because it's just so much fun. It's so interesting to think from somebody who, like in rhetoric, you do a different kind of communication than I do. Mm-hmm. But in rhetoric, where humanity's driven, and in rhetoric, it's like, who's the audience? What is the audience? These aren't statistically answerable questions to a rhetorician. To a comm scholar, they are.
Yeah.
They have many tools in social science to answer those questions with surprising accuracy, really intensive accuracy. And if you have the right kind of expensive tools, i.e., you're working in an industry where your livelihood and millions of dollars depend on it. You have incredible tools for knowing exactly what people are reading and thinking about. Example, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, this kind of thing. So I think that that's one way to think about the difference between rhetoric and comm studies. But in rhetoric, we tend to think in the normative. We're like, how should we consider audience? What should the audience be thought of? How should the rhetor interact with the audience? And I've had so many interesting challenges to what I thought was good. It's been fantastic. So the first one, I was like amazed at the hate. And a lot of the comments don't even make a lot of sense to me, but there was just a lot of pickup from different people across the internet using it for their own purposes, I think. And then the second one, I was making fun of that audience and being a dill hole. And then a whole other audience found it, and they had no reference for that. And they were like, wow, you're like really a jerk. You're like terrible.
How do you feel about all of this, Steve?
Tell
me how you really feel.
I wish I had 100,000 more viewers. I wish I had more of an audience, because I think the bigger the audience gets, the more unwieldy it gets. And then YouTube is really the audience diffuser.
Yeah,
it atomizes and atomizes, and so there's I just finished Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. Have you read Anxious Generation? A lot of people have read it.
I've heard of it.
It's getting a lot of play. I read it, and he talks about a concept of like alone together is the social media world. So teenagers are alone together for most of their psychologically developmental, important stages of their life. They're alone together. It's a kind of a sad image. You know, they're all sitting at the table together, surfing scrolling, you know. And I was thinking about that with YouTube, is like everybody's watching the same video as an audience, the way I think of an audience. But they're not together. They're all alone. But then through the comments, they find some solidarity, because somebody says some like really like nonsensical ad hominem thing, and then it gets like 4 likes. It gets more likes than the comments get more likes than the video gets.
And the reason, yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you think of it as like hyper atomized audience.
I'll be honest though, like, you know, YouTube videos, and actually the platform that is YouTube, is not really conducive for like in-depth conversations when it comes to like audience and influencer, right? Like, as an influencer, that's you. As an influencer, right? Like, you can put things out into the ether, and folks can react to it and attempt to counter what you're saying and take you down. But at the end of the day, right, the way YouTube is constructed is that it pushes the contents that have the most interaction to the top, and it won't actually lead to like good degrees of like conversation between you and those who took the time to watch your video.
Except a lot of them did subscribe, so hopefully they that means they want to interact more, I would think. Or they just are like hate subscribing. They're like, oh man, I gotta watch this guy shake my head at what he says, which is fine too. I trade in disagreement. I love disagreement. I trade in disagreement. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I think that the shallowness of disagreement comes out in those comments. The shallowness of our contemporary moment and the ability to engage, the rhetorical illiteracy of people really came out in that, because people can disagree with you, and then they immediately turn to the ad hominem, or some kind of irrelevant challenge, like the cabinet maker who wants to debate me. I don't understand what even that has to do with anything.
I'll be honest with you though.
And I think
there's something to be
short attention span too, like short attention span, like, you know, your world in 90 seconds, kind of, you know, the podcast news update, the Bing or Apple news update. So there's this false sense that one can understand what's going on very quickly. So there's a virtue about being able to watch 3 minutes of a 20-minute video and be like, okay, I got what this guy's about, and then you respond. And it's just not a very conducive to democratic. It's not conducive to what's necessary for democratic ways of thinking. And
I'll be honest,
it's a big challenge. All these are big challenges. But I love it. I love every comment. I love every viewer. I love all of you. I have
There's
nothing but love.
there's something to be said about how viewers' attention spans have been drastically diminished because of TikTok, right? Like the short form video format.
Read the Jonathan Haidt book, man. It's great.
Right.
I mean, I want to say it's great. Now I'm going to get a bunch of hate because that book is very controversial. The data is like overwhelming. It's like when you're at the beach and you're like, here comes a big wave, and it hits you, and then the next big wave hits you before you've recovered from the first wave. That's what reading the Haidt book is like, because he's just data-driven dude. He's a data-driven guy.
Just to like focus on like, you know, reactions to your videos, right? And this isn't just toward your videos. It's to any videos, right? Because when I've recorded my own videos, my own lectures, right? Like I have come to the conclusion that most folks, if they're actually going to be watching it, are going to watch the first few minutes, and that's it. And then they're going to just lose, you know, either increase the speed to 2x or just potentially lose interest. And, you know, because of how this short form video formatting has essentially permeated its way into every single social media platform, Snapchat, TikTok. Well, TikTok is the thing. Instagram. It's on Facebook. It's on what's it called? Freaking, you know, Reddit.com, right? It's on Reddit, right? They have their own short form, you know, video messaging, and it's only catering to this sort of like short attention span, where if you don't make your point in the first like 10 seconds or even 20 seconds, like people aren't going to really interpret the video. They're not going to parse out the deeper arguments you're making.
Yeah,
and it's unfortunate.
They feel like they can. I think everybody instead of like hermeneutic charity, we have like the hermeneutics of doubt. And that is like, okay, so speech is a thin veneer that conceals a truth that the speaker doesn't want us to get. So the game is name that tune. You remember that old game show, Name That Tune? I can name that tune in 5 notes. I can name it in 4 notes. I can name it in 2 notes. You know, that's kind of what people do with speech in general now. So they're like, I don't have to listen to. It's like Karl Popper's Nightmare. They're like, I don't have to listen to very much of Steve talking at all to scratch that veneer and see the rotting wood underneath. So they'll watch about 3 minutes, 20 seconds is the average for my videos. And then they stop and then they make a comment. They're like, this guy doesn't get it. See, the virtue is they've scratched the veneer. They can see the quality of the wood and they don't like it. And there's no virtue in that. The virtue is patience and not waiting for your time to respond, but waiting for the person's case to complete, which is something that if you teach beginning students how to debate, they hate that.
Yeah.
They hate it. They want to move on.
Yeah.
Or they think that the best thing to do is just say what they believe and not develop it, because you don't need the veneer. It's just going to get scratched off anyway. So you don't need it. So that's what I've learned, like teaching debate to Gen Z. Those are some of the challenges there. And, you know, the same research challenges that when teaching millennials, it was the same research challenges are still there. Like Google search, pick the 4th one. Yeah. Quote 2 lines of it, you're done. You know, that's another big challenge. But the YouTube thing has really opened my eyes to the impoverished rhetorical environment of the world. And it just makes me want to make more videos to try to address it. And I made one about debate format for the presidential debates. And then I got a couple of comments of people who are like, yeah, but this won't work because presidential debates aren't structured like formal debates, which I'm aware of. But I think it's interesting that those people are out there and they've already thought through that. And they're like, well, it won't work for that because the presidential debate is just optics. And I have my own rubric for presidential debates that I'm like writing a book about right now. But
when I used to teach persuasive speaking, I would actually have students evaluate presidential and also congressional speeches, right? And I would give them a rubric that was like, you know, all right, you have to use these 6 criteria, and you know, it's supposed to be very objective. You are not supposed to say whether or not you agree with what's being said. You're supposed to like actually listen and see how these arguments are being constructed and the degree to which they're appropriate or not appropriate for the audience. And for a lot of students, they couldn't get past this idea that as a viewer, particularly in a political environment, right, it is acceptable to pull out and almost dissect to what the speaker is saying for the purposes of understanding. If anything, they were very impatient. And perhaps, Gen Z and, to a degree, Gen Alpha are becoming increasingly impatient.
Is Gen Alpha the young end of the Gen Z?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Generation Alpha.
That's a cute name.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking that like politics going forward are going to have to cater to that degree of impatience. Right? We can't be slow and steady for getting folks on board with persuasive ideas.
Yeah.
We can't assume that they're going to take the time to dissect what's being said and give these arguments a fair shake, right? Instead, you need to, and I hate to use this analogy, but it's a shotgun analogy, right? You have to essentially spray and pray and hope that, what you said in that small burst of argumentation gets heard.
Well, I think there's a lot there. We're going to have to wrap it up, sadly, because I have to pack and stuff. I got to go to Florida tomorrow. It's very sad.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's not very sad. I'm excited about going to Florida. It's not very sad. It's a good thing.
Enjoy the beaches.
It's going to be great. Well, I actually like the Sound beaches up here in the North Shore. I kind of like the New York beaches, but the Gulf of Mexico beaches are great if you like taking a warm bath.
Yes,
a warm saltwater bath. But my dad at his house, he's got a pool, so I think we'll be using that quite a bit. But anyway, I did want to say a couple of things, which is I do think that we can go even deeper there with students and say, well, maybe you're not getting why this political campaign speech is persuasive, because it's not persuasive. It's meant to describe to the already supportive what they think a good message to the other side looks like. So they're almost kind of like pantomimes of persuasion. And I've done a similar thing, but I don't do it like that. I have them look at political speeches and congressional speeches and use Umberto Eco's checklist for fascist discourse. There's like 10 elements that appear in proto-fascist discourse. And I'm like, raise your hand when you think you've got all 10. And it doesn't take long. We did a John Kerry speech, and I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes.
That's
all the elements of, I've been teaching a long time. All the elements of fascism had been identified. So, I can see why a lot of people are like, well, this is kind of a non-starter with why to reject Trump. But maybe they're not doing it on intellectual grounds. But anyway, Will, it's been great to have you on. And we talked for an hour. Can you believe it?
Oh my goodness.
Hour long, yeah. And I don't know. Yeah, and I think there's still an appetite for long-form video. We have these podcasts that go for an hour or two. And then, of course, most famously, Jenny Nicholson did her 4-hour review of Star Wars Disney on YouTube and has over almost 3 million views for a 4-hour video talking about a hotel at Star Wars, Disney Star Wars.
Isn't that the same length as The Lord of the Rings Unabridged or whatever the heck
it's
it's
longer,
called?
That's
extended.
Longer, I think that's longer.
Sheesh, 4 hours.
4-hour YouTube video with 3 million something views. Isn't that wild? But I wonder if YouTube comes back and they look at the data. And it's like if I clicked on it and watch a little bit of it and I come back, YouTube remembers where I am usually and will keep playing the video. But I don't think an hour is too long for like a podcast format. But we should do this again. What should we call this when we talk? We should call it, Yes, We Have Communication Degrees.
Yes,
just to head off those
just
comments.
Don't ask us for help.
just to head off those comments before they appear.
Wait, we're doctors? Question mark? I don't know.
Yeah, doctoris question mark.
The doctoris chorus. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's going to be Communication Professors Talk Politics, Episode 1.
Awesome.
All right, you call yourself a communication professor?
Yeah.
Communication scholar, communication expert.
Let's say expert.
Okay, so we'll say communication experts talk politics. That'll be the name of the episode. And we'll see you on another one later, and then look forward for. Oh, that's my phone call there.
Oh.
Gotta go. But look for the next one. Look for Film from Florida. I'll put a lot of that in here too. All right.
Drink coffee responsibly, folks.
Bye, Will.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Steve.